that were offered yesterday in another talk. And again, DNS is a fairly insecure protocol, and the more services we stack on top of DNS, the more likely it is that there's going to be a large-scale problem one of these days. So really the only thing I have to say about SPF or sender IDs, do not use it. Do not publish any SPF records, because that just encourages people to use them. And do not, under any circumstances, filter your email because of SPF. Unfortunately, now, since Spam Assassin even now does SPF filtering by default, I think, since version 3, so I don't know what they were thinking, but please consider carefully anything you do with SPF. This is the latest idea. Actually, it's a fairly old idea, but this is probably going to happen more nowadays to fight spam. Blocking port 25. This means that on regular dial-up accounts, the ISP blocks the port 25 for outgoing connections. And this is reasonable if you consider what I said earlier, that most junk email nowadays is sent by zombies, which are cracked home user PCs, and they are using current mechanisms. They're hard to track because the IP address changes every 24 hours, and you do not have any chance to track them through DNS-based black hole lists. And even if you could track them, the spammers couldn't just switch to the next set of zombies. They have thousands and thousands of these machines available, and if the first 1,000 are listed, they just use the next 1,000. And you can rent them, and they are rented out by people, and so there's absolutely no problem. Even if you could track zombies, this would not do any significant impact. So what they are proposing now, what they're already doing in certain areas, is that they block the port 25 for outgoing traffic, except to the designated email server of the ISP, which supposedly has some sort of rate controls or some checks of various kinds, so there's a little bit more security. And this is actually not so bad, because it actually indirectly adds more security for the regular end users, the dial-up users of that particular ISP, because a virus writer or someone who tries to target these machines for owning them is really, they're no longer an attractive target for doing that, because even if you could take control of these machines, you cannot really do the things you want anymore. Of course, there are other things you can do if you have taken control of a PC, but for the purpose of sending out email, they are no longer that attractive. So, of course, viruses do not really discriminate on that level, but there's a certain extra level of security for end users. So, again, as I said, it's not all that bad idea, but there's, of course, also problems with that. If you want to use email accounts other than the one that your ISP gives you, the regular average users maybe has the dial-up account or the DSL account nowadays, which is also dial-up, at a certain ISP, and also has the email address there. But if you have more than one email account, or you just get your email somewhere else, then you have a problem, because you are forced to send all your email through your ISP, but if you use a different domain, or you have a work account, or you have more accounts for other projects, or where you contract, or what have you, then you have a problem, because you're supposed to use that ISP, that domain's mail server according to their policy, and according to the policy of your ISP, you have to send email through that mail server. The workaround that is proposed or that is implemented is that the ISPs allow you to route any email you want through their mail server, subject to authentication, and that works. But again, now ISPs have the power over you to control where you send your email. You can no longer use your own email server for reasons that I mentioned previously. You can no longer install your own mail server software, your own filtering systems, and if the ISP is blacklisted, you have no way to get around that. Or if you just want to prevent that all your communication is logged, which it will be. And all of this is also completely incompatible with SPF that I just explained, because SPF tells you have to send your email through what the owner of the domain says. And on the other hand, this concept says that you have to send your email through what the ISP says. And if those two are not talking to each other, which they likely will not, then you have a problem that you just can't send email anymore for certain domains. So what I suggest about this is, and this will likely happen because people are talking about this now, and in the US for certain email servers it's already happening. Yes, question?
With SMTPS, the whole thing will...
Yeah, but no, the question was, or the comment was about SMTPS, but I don't know what exactly you mean by that, or how that figures in here.
Yeah, when you go to this, don't use SMTP, but SMTPS, or the spammer using SMTPS, which is quite often.
Going through a different port, you mean? Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's really what I was going to say is yesterday, I don't know, what was his name, Brent de Winter, who talked about the data retention legislation in the EU, and he suggested just use a different port. If you send all your stuff through port 26 or 24, then it's not considered email anymore and it's not logged. And the same really applies here. If you can just use a different port, put your own email server out on the internet and use a different port, or use other SMTP-like protocols that go through different ports. And I guess they can also block all the other kinds of ports, obviously. But what this does is, obviously spammers are interested in spamming people who use port 25, right? So this will actually prevent spam. Of course, you have workarounds. I mean, we always have workarounds. We can tunnel anything through anything. So, but for the average user or people who do not want to spend all their time setting up hosts in different countries and all that, this is going to be a problem, especially if you add up other restrictions like SPF and things that can happen. Of course, we always have workarounds. There's not ever going to be a way where you say, I cannot do anything anymore. But there's just going to be more and more problems that people are facing. So what I would suggest here, if you're interested in that or if you're considering doing that, even if you work in ISP, I would not actually mind if this happened, but then you have to give your users the option of opting out of that, with no questions asked and no fees being paid or anything you might consider. So if the user can just go there, call you up, or go into some sort of management interface and say, I do not want my ports blocked, then opt out of that. And I think that would work. But you know, who is going to do that? Large ISPs, they just block everything, and then people are going to be happy, I guess. So I don't know if this is happening in Europe already, but I know this in the US, certain ISPs have at least done that a few years ago and have had problems with that. They do, AOL does it in Germany, Europe also? Okay.
In Australia, it's been widely done for many years. I've been on this for about 4 or 5 years, something like that.
This has been going on for a while now in certain areas, but I was at a conference in September on spam issues where a lot of government people were there, and they are now discussing making this well, they can't force you to do it, I guess, or they could try to, but this is going to be sort of like the official recommendation nowadays or something like that. So it might happen in more places.
Personally, I think this is back in the sort of the really big Outlook virus time. I think it helped a lot just on you could send mail once they started blocking ports, because not everything was filled with junk suddenly. So I think in general it's a good thing just for server load reasons.
Yep. So yeah, this is not bad, but you have to give people a way to opt out of that, I would think. So this is just, the next thing is challenge response systems, and I think most of you have dealt with these at one time or other. And this is just really bad. It's a kind of gray listing on a different level, if you like. The way it works is when the user of that system would receive an email, they would send you back a challenge email, which most of the time, if you have to answer the challenge, which most of the time is just replying to the email or clicking on the link, or maybe you have to solve a puzzle or something like that. But there has to be some kind of show that there was a manual intervention there. And then when the receiver gets that email back, then then the original message gets through. So that's easy concept, but it doesn't work. Again, here we know sender addresses are routinely faked, so all these challenge messages just go to innocent users who are annoyed by them. And this has the side effect again, or the nice side effect, you think that users of these challenge response systems are now finding themselves on blacklists for spamming. And so yeah, if you believe that spam is now more than 50% of email, then about 50% of there's 50% of just useless, annoying mail being sent to innocent users. Spammers are getting smarter and smarter, and they can actually fake their emails to get around these authentication mechanisms. They can analyze email traffic and figure out who talks to whom and guess what kind of sender addresses might already be authenticated, or figure other ways around that. So spammers really, if they're a little bit intelligent at all, can figure out ways around these systems. The other problem is just at the concept that apparently two people who use these systems can never start talking to each other, because the second system would just send back a challenge and the other guy is not going to accept the challenge. So there has to be some sort of a loopholes in these systems that the challenge messages of the other system can get through your own challenging system without any challenge. And of course, you can also exploit that if you are trying to write spam or send some sort of a email through that you do not want to be checked. And challenge response systems would also require installing loopholes in spam filters, so your challenges are not filtered as spam. And anytime you are requiring installing a loophole, loopholes can be exploited. Challenge response systems actually facilitate phishing. Imagine everyone used challenge response systems, and then if you want to phish for email addresses or do anything of that sort, or just want to verify email addresses, you just send someone a challenge message, and if they click OK or respond to it, then you know the email address is live. And so this really would hurt even the more inexperienced users even more than anything else, because then they would just click on everything, and that is of course what they're not supposed to do. And then you also have to consider that tracking these challenge response systems, there's emails going back and forth, and you have to keep track of all that. And those systems are installed on the ISP, on the machine of your ISP, and they have keep track of extensive databases. They know when you received email, when you responded to email, and what time you were home, and these things. And that's just more and more data being gathered. So I guess you all know that challenge response systems are counterproductive. They lose email, and they really place the burden not on the spammers, but on the regular users, which is the fundamental flaw in this whole system. So I guess you all know that you should not use them. So here are a couple of other, I have to hurry up a little, here are a couple of other ways that people have tried to fight spam, which is kind of weird. I know someone who they figured, well, I do not trust external lists of things to block, which is reasonable. And they figured, well, we do our own, and which of course does not work. You cannot, even if you have a large staff, you cannot keep track of all the email addresses being listed and delisted and all that manually. So that doesn't work. Either use public lists or you don't use them, but don't try to keep track of them yourself. Running a local Paizo server, I did not talk about Paizo, it's kind of a questionable concept in my mind, but running a local Paizo server which only lists emails that you have already identified and then feeding that back into your own spam filter does not work, because you do not find any more spam or any less spam, you just find the same spam again. Only throw off your whole scoring mechanism if you do it through Spam Assassin, for example. Yeah, for getting the MX backup, I don't think a lot of people use MX backups anymore, unless you're sort of a large ISP, but secure in your primary server and not secure in your MX backup is just stupid, because spammers spam the MX backup first. Then there are a couple of some people do that, they just check for any kind of standards violation, or there's rcignorant.org, which is a DNS-based list, or complaining if the subject line is not encoded properly. And well, that is nice if you want to do that, but that doesn't have anything to do with fighting spam. So, don't bother people about that. You can educate people about that on your own time, I guess, but you don't find any spam with checking if the subject line is encoded properly. That has absolutely nothing to do with that, so consider not doing that. And